Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Next Generation Infrastructure and Industry 4.0 stage here at CogX 2021. My name is Laura Foster, and I am the host of this stage today. The next session is on intelligent automation and driving industry transformation. And I am delighted to be hosting this session myself and also be joined by Eric Tyree, who is Head of AI and Research at Prism. Now, intelligent automation, which can be the amalgamation of a number of different technologies, including RPA, AI, and business process optimization, has become a necessity during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as I'm sure Eric and I will get onto a little bit later on in this discussion, has really helped with resiliency and recovery for a number of industries and sectors, no matter the size or the scope of the business. I am delighted to introduce Eric to be joining me here today and to give him a moment to introduce what he does at Prism and also what he thinks intelligent automation is. Welcome, Eric.
Sure, thanks, Laura. Pleasure to be here. So yeah, Prism, as I explained to my 10-year-old kid, is my job to put brains into robots. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to infuse much more sort of sophisticated human-like capabilities into software robots, but also I get quite involved in product strategy and technology strategy as well. So in terms of intelligent automation, I pretty much just defined it. I think at the end of the day, when people talk about intelligent automation, what they're talking about is putting more sophisticated AI-like technologies into software robots. And specifically what this is things like machine learning so that software robots can learn machine vision so that they can see what's on screens and process things on screens, NLP so that they can read and write. And also a really interesting area that's popping up is program synthesis so that robots, or digital workers as we call them, can write their own programming. And this is becoming really, really important as organizations scale and start adding more and more digital workers to their workforce. They need a capability for digital workers to either write their own programming after seeing a process, or something changes, a system they're automating on changes, or a process needs to change, they can write their own programming. This is program synthesis, which is actually one of the oldest areas of AI, but is sort of sat there sort of as an academic subject for many, many decades. And then now with intelligent automation, it's coming out. So that's what it is. It's making digital workers more sophisticated so they can have more sophisticated interactions with human workers and automate more and more complex processes.
Thank you, Eric. So the first question I want to ask you today is looking at how adoption of intelligent automation has changed over recent years. Of course, this includes the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've been on a lot longer of a trajectory where we've seen adoption of intelligent automation increase. And arguably, it's becoming part of a company's business strategy. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing to bear in mind is that, robotic process automation, or RPA, has been around for 15 years now. So it's well past its early adopter phase. So, but I do think most of the history of RPA has been one of applying it sort of at the middle of the organization. So you're going into an organization, you're looking for processes that are A, relatively easy to automate, and B, have a high ROI. And that's fine. It's still a very prevalent strategy for pursuing automation. But the big change is that organizations have realized that you can use automation to strategic advantage. So it's gone beyond, hey, can we find some processes that might, say, give us some process efficiency savings? Now it's much more about, how do I grow my business? How do I make my business more competitive? How do I improve customer service? And I'll give you an example of how this is sort of getting to people's thinking. Is if you look at UK building societies. So these are relatively small banks owned by their shareholders, or owned by the account holders, but like credit unions in the States. They're under extreme pressure from fintech, and so they are looking at how do we compete with fintech given where we are now. And what they're looking at is using automation as a way of creating those 5-minute mortgage approvals, 2-minute account setup periods, just like the new fintech banks are doing it. But the impetus for doing this is not coming from the middle management trying to look at process efficiencies. It's coming from the C-suite. So the C-suite are looking at the credit union or the building society saying, we have to change. We have to change quickly. We're capital constrained, so we can't just go and rebuild all of our legacy systems. So they're looking at automation as a technique or as a tool for converting their organizations to something that can compete with fintech, but doing it on a very automated basis. So it's much more, the big change is that automation sort of broken out into the C-suite and is viewed as a tool for achieving core strategic objectives that the company is pursuing.
So already you've touched on some of the really great advantages of intelligent automation and tools like RPA. But can you dive a little bit deeper into how IA can become an enabler of business growth?
Sure. So I'll give you some examples, and I'll start with a Maastricht Bank, which is a great example of how you can use intelligent automation to improve your competitiveness. So Maastricht Bank is a trade finance, or has a trade finance business, and trade finance is actually a very simple idea. It's, let's say I'm ordering rubber ducks from China. So I'm placing an order for 1 million rubber ducks. And the Chinese manufacturer says, fine, but you need to pay me. And I say, look, I'm more than happy to pay you, but I'm not going to pay you to actually receive the ducks, right? So the role of trade finance is to be sort of a middle person who sits there and works with the manufacturer and says, okay, I'm going to take the money from the person who wants to buy your rubber ducks, and I'll hold it in escrow. And they say to the person who's buying the rubber ducks, tell you what I'll do is I won't release those funds until you confirm to me that you've actually received those rubber ducks. And it's really what it all boils down to. So this is very simple. And as you can imagine, it's a very commoditized part of banking. A lot of banks have trade finance desks. They're all offering kind of the same thing. The challenge with trade finance is that it's very document heavy. I mean, you literally have physical documents from the port saying, yes, there are 1 million rubber ducks in this container, all's good, right? And that document has to go to the bank looks at it, stamps it, says, okay, we're good to go, and releases money. So traditionally, trade finance was taking 2 to 3 days because of all the paperwork. And it was traditionally very manual. You had lots of people looking at pieces of paper saying, yes, this is okay, and then typing in and taking stuff out of one document, putting into another. There's about a dozen or so documents you have to work with to kind of get this transaction done. So anyway, so that's the world. Maastricht Bank kind of thought, you know what? We want to be competitive. We want to change the way this whole game is played. So they pretty much automated the entire trade finance piece. And what they did is they did it with software robots. So they didn't rewrite their legacy systems. They didn't spend millions on turning over new IT systems. They put digital workers with software robots on top of their existing systems. And they automated the entire process. They automated the classification of documents. They automated the process of understanding what's in a document, reading the document, approving the finance. And what they wound up doing is taking 90% of the time and effort it takes to arrange trade finance. Now, that on the one hand, you might look at this and say, well, this is a process efficiency story, and it's not. It's about competitiveness. Because if you're in the Middle East and you have a choice between 10 banks that will take 3 days to arrange your trade finance, or you can go to this one bank and you can get it done in a couple hours, who are you going to bank with? And so this is huge. This is massive competitive advantage for the organization. But the key to them doing this is that they had that senior management buy-in. It was the C-suite and the COO looking at this saying, hey, this can make a huge difference to this business, and we're going to pursue automation from a strategic point of view. And that's how organizations are getting this kind of change. It's spotting the opportunity for what automation can do for them strategically and treating it as a strategic initiative and changing the way the organization actually operates.
100% adoption of IE is definitely a strategic initiative, but you're definitely saying there that it's a lot easier to get C-suite buy-in around this technology these days. Has that been a growing trend, or is this something that's been brought about by COVID-19?
It's both. So there's two. It's effectively, you think about it though, when an organization thinks about fundamentally changing their operations, and that's what we're talking about here, is moving from a traditional way of operating to an automation first way of automating. That's not a trivial decision. It's, and it's a lot of work, and there's a bit of risk in there. So you don't really, organizations don't want to do this unless they feel there's a massive gain to be had, or there's a huge risk they're averting, or there's competitive pressure. So what we're seeing now is that this sort of strategic view on automation is probably most prevalent in financial services because of fintech, because of the commoditization of finance. They have to do this because it's a matter of existential survival. So they're willing and they're up for making those kind of big changes to organizations to be competitive through automation. The other big area is healthcare. This is run broader. This is a direct result of COVID. A lot of health providers have realized, look, we can spend $1 on administration, or we can put that dollar into patient care. And it's COVID, I think, has forced a lot of change in the way in which healthcare is provided in terms of administratively. And it's made people realize that, this is not simply about process efficiency. This is about saving lives and providing care to our patients. And we're seeing a huge change now in that sector. Telco is another one under pressure from new entrants, utilities, retail are realizing that, if you want to fight, Amazon and the other sort of big box companies, you need to look at automation to make yourself more competitive. So it's definitely emerging as a C-suite topic, but it tends to be in industries that are under pressure for change. And so I'd say it's past the early adopter phase. It's in that next piece where people realize, okay, this technology is proven. We know we can use it. We feel it's safe, and it's the realization that it's now part of the digitization project that every business is going through.
I'm really glad you've brought up healthcare there, which is one of the key use cases for intelligent automation. And in fact, at techUK just a couple of weeks ago, we had a really big deep dive webinar into how intelligent automation has helped the healthcare industry during the COVID-19 pandemic. But of course, the NHS, particularly now and everything that's going on, they're dealing with a lot of backlog of information. And there's a really big challenge that's facing the NHS and healthcare in the UK going forward. How can you envision IA being a really crucial tool there, and maybe touching on other forms of ROI that can really be seen through the health sector? Sure.
Okay. So I'll give one example that I'm seeing emerge quite strongly is automated diagnosis. So if you get an MRI scan or a PET scan, the standard procedure in almost all virtually the other healthcare system on the planet is that scan gets reviewed twice. It gets reviewed usually either by your primary doctor, whoever's doing the treating you, or by a specialist radiologist attached to them. Whatever they come up with, it then goes to another reviewer who just confirms the diagnosis or says, well, not quite so sure, we should investigate further. Now, the problem most healthcare systems in the West have right now is that there aren't enough qualified people to review those scans. So you wind up delays and backlogs, and this can have serious implications as something that needs to be treated quickly. But also you think about patient discomfort and the emotional impact of, hey, I've got a scare, I've had a scan, I'm going to wait a couple of weeks to find out, do I need to worry about this? So IA is coming in, is that there's very, very good technology now for automating the scanning of images. It's at least as good as humans now, if not better. So it's passing that sort of litmus test of automation. But where IA is coming in is that, so what people are doing is you're getting one diagnosis done by a human doctor. The second one is increasingly being done on an automated basis. But where IA is coming in then is that also creates a lot of admin. This image needs to be processed, it needs to be sent. Once it's been reviewed, you need to generate a report that says, hey, this I concur, I don't, here's why, so on and so forth. And then it also has to be processed by the administration in the hospital. So what people are doing is they're saying, what, we can automate this pretty much entirely other than that first doctor, assuming that there's no conflict between the two opinions. So the image is reviewed initially by a radiologist. That is then passed to automatically emailed or to an automated scan, which also looks at it, and if it confirms it, all the paperwork and all the sort of reporting needed around that is automated through intelligent automation. So what it means is that hospitals and healthcare can leverage their existing radiology resource better and more efficiently. But also the ROI on this is that it's probably saving lives, it's probably reducing client discomfort, and certainly reducing the stress of and delay that non-automated processes are. And that's, when you look at healthcare, that is the ROI. I mean, you'll talk to administrators and they'll say, yeah, this is about, we've got to reduce costs, we've got to increase efficiencies. But at the end of the day, what they're also saying is, hey, we can serve our patients much better than we could before. And this is potentially life and death if it's picking up something that someone needs immediate treatment for. So yeah, it's not all about process efficiency. It's about the effectiveness of the organization to serve its customer.
Yes, and in the healthcare sector, definitely allowing better patient care and patient access. So I want to kind of push the conversation on just a little bit slightly there. And we've talked about some of the really great opportunities of intelligent automation, but not necessarily some of the challenges that can come about from in the process of adopting this technology. So do you think businesses in the UK have an easy time kind of putting intelligent automation into their business infrastructure, into their business services? Or is there any advice that you'd like to maybe share to businesses kind of just getting started on their IA journey?
Yeah, I think the first thing to bear in mind is that when you go wholesale on automation and you really are looking at converting operations to be automation first, this is as much an operational problem as it's a people challenge. The one thing that's really interesting is, I've seen, we've got at Blue Prism, we have 1,500 customers, or maybe more than that now, and it's extremely rare for an organization to let anybody go over automation. And so you dig into, well, why is that? And what's really kind of going on? And it looks like for organizations that are doing automation for services, which is primarily what you're doing intelligent automation for. It's, even if you're a manufacturer, you're probably using it on your operations side. What people are telling us is, well, the reason we're automating, it's not that we've got too many people and we want to replace the machines to reduce cost. The problem we have is we don't have enough qualified people to do the jobs we want to do. So what we're doing is we're looking at using automation to effectively move people away from manual work and onto work that needs human beings. Now, that sounds great, and that is a good story, but that's also a challenge because you do need to move people around the business. And so the key challenge with large scale, enterprise scale automation is, one, you need to think about, okay, you should not just automate your existing processes. What you really should be doing is looking at, okay, I should go to some sort of zero-based design mindset. I should look at all my processes and rebuild them from scratch with automation first, and then look at how do I redesign my processes to get the best out of robots and to get the best out of people. That gives you the best automation experience. But also what it does is allows you to kind of step back and think, okay, I've got, for example, I'm a retail bank, and I've got a number of people who are dealing with compliance issues and having to ring up customers to validate documents and make sure they're okay for the bank and all that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing you want to automate because it's being done for hygiene reasons. You have to do that as a bank. But then you look at those people and say, well, actually, they've all got really good customer skills. When you think about it, they have to go to a customer who's now irritated because you're delaying the account opening and explain to them, look, I need a bit more information. Can you, give me this, this, and this, and we're all good. Those people should be on customer support. They should be on the sales side of the organization. So that challenge it's relatively easy to deal with. And I think the critical bit is to bring your HR organization in early to start working on it. And then give them the reassurance and look, okay, yes, we're automating, but the problem we've got is too few people, not too many. And so we're going to find out that we're going to look at your skills and we're going to put you in a much more effective part of the organization to leverage those skills. So that's the first piece. And the other piece is just making sure you've got genuine alignment. I think it's really important when you go into large scale automation programs that everyone understands it. They understand why this is being done. They understand why this is important to the business. They understand the strategic importance of it and why that if this program is successful, the business is successful. That ensures, because you are moving people's cheese. You are changing the way operations work. And a lot of people will say, hey, do we know what we're doing here? And so having not only just the right technology and being, sure that you've chosen the right technology for doing this, it's also about methodology. It's about thinking, okay, how do I plan for this? How do I rethink my operations? How do I figure out, okay, well, how do I do the transition? At some point, I'm going from my current operations to my automated operations. Do I do that as a lift and shift? Do I do this gradually? What's the right thing for the organization in terms of managing risk? But also making sure that I achieve what I'm trying to achieve as quickly as possible. So it boils down to do I have the strategic buy-in? Do I have clear alignment from CEO right on down? Everyone understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. How have I thought about the impacts of this? And how from a human capital point of view, how are people's roles going to be changed? And what's my process? And what processes do I need to execute on that change? And then finally, how do I redesign my operations in a way that is optimized for the technology and people, and not just an automation of existing processes?
So you talked a lot there about reskilling and retraining the workforce, and I do want to get onto that in just a second. I think that's incredibly crucial, so we will be discussing that. But very quickly, you also talked about how intelligent automation can enable better data hygiene, and then some additional opportunities can come about. Do you have any examples where that's happened? Or
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just, do you have any examples?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so just to step back where this comes from. So I'm by background, I'm a data transformation person. So I've been doing very large scale transformations using data and AI for large corporates. And the name of that game at the end of the day, whether it's personalizing a retail website or revenue optimization or whatever, is you're taking information, data, you're making an observation on it, so it's some analysis of it, and then you're trying to take an action on it. And so you think about it, that's a cycle. I see data, I analyze, and I act. And the name of the game of transformations like this is to just shorten that circle and create value for the business. What's happening with automation is it speeds that whole thing up tremendously. So if you think about it, when you automate something, the data you produce from that automation is not only more voluminous than anything you've had before, but it tends to be higher quality because there's less human error in it. And it's also usually quite programmatic in how it's generated. So what companies are realizing is that an interesting byproduct of automation is a generation of large amounts of high quality data, which you can either use to feed your automation program further, or you can use it in other parts of their organization. And a good example of this is JLR. Who started out doing automation from the point of view of they wanted to speed their ability to respond to market changes, but they're sort of saddled with some fairly old legacy setup, and they realized that they could automate on top of those legacy systems to speed up their ability to change their operations to respond to market pressure, and that's great. But they realized two things. First one is that they could get a compounding return on automation, that as they automated, they could take a portion of that gain they got from automation, reinvest that capital into automation and compound out those returns. So one of the things they've realized is you can get an exponential ROI from automation. The other thing they realized, though, is that this was generating a lot of really good data. And they were using the data in two ways. One is that actually they could feed the data back into automation and it was actually creating new automation opportunities, but also all this information can be used by the rest of the JLR organization. So, for example, when we talk about building MI systems on top of automation programs, we always design in data feeds that go straight to the corporate MI people because they are already set up to handle this, and they love and welcome the really good high quality data that automation produces, and they can actually make use of it very, very quickly. So a big part of large scale enterprise scale automation programs is actually the MI it generates, because you need that in part to run the automation with a new automation first processes, but also it's giving you a lot of information how the business is running, and suddenly that cycle between data observation and action can be compressed even faster than you ever could before. So it's interesting. It's spawning a whole new area around automation where originally when I was talking to say COOs or department heads about the benefits of automation, they very quickly realized that there's an MI angle to this, and that this makes their jobs a lot easier in terms of running their operations. And that piece of automation, the MI and the data piece, is now emerging quite strongly as a new kind of technology area around automation in its own right, because it's kind of like this secondary revolution you get, and people realize it very, very quickly. And I think it's actually becoming a critical part of large-scale automations.
I think that's a really crucial point and really showcasing the advantages of intelligent automation there. But just to push back ever so slightly, the JLR use case that you highlighted there really shows a business model that has agility built into it and people who are looking for opportunities there. But for some businesses who are still maybe in the early days of the adoption or transformation process, they could get really overwhelmed with all this new data coming through. How can you explain that to maybe SMEs who are just kind of starting out?
Yeah, when you think about it, is everyone wants to be data driven. So what you want to run your business on empirically as best you can. So you want to be able to understand what's going on in the business, what's going on in your market, what's going on with your customers, what's going on with your operations, and you want to be able to understand that in as data driven way as you possibly can. Right? You want to be like Amazon. You want to just run the business by the numbers as best you can, because one, it's not the only way, but a great way of understanding what your customers want. And Amazon's probably the best example on the planet for getting people to buy things that they want, they didn't even know they wanted. It's almost magical the way they're able to throw up product ideas to you when you're just trying to buy a book, and suddenly you're buying a bicycle. And So that's where you want to get to. And so if you're an SME, that data is really, really important, because it means you can run your business in a way that's not based just on intuition, not just based on judgment, but in ways that you can then test these things. You can say, okay, you know what, I think customer, I'm a I don't know, a clothing retailer, and I think red's the new black. And so you can test it. You can look, okay, what is the rate at which people are buying red jumpers versus black ones now, and make that decision empirically. And what automation gives you is just that much more data to be able to make those kind of decisions. What's more, it allows you to much more easily incorporate those decisions into your operation. So you can start automating some of that decision making, or at least the processes you need around that decision making, faster. So I think it's just as valuable for SMEs as it is for large businesses. If anything, it's easier if you're an SME, because you just have fewer overheads, you have less complexity. You're probably less likely to be saddled with legacy unless you're an older business. So you're much more positioned to have the agility to take advantage of this agility, and to be able to change your processes much more quickly. And we see that. I mean, talking to a small bank, you can very easily get in a conversation with a COO or even a CEO or CFO, and they can execute. You talk to a very large bank, it's much harder for them to turn the tanker. They still want to do it. It's just that they have that much more complexity to deal with. So I would say if you're an SME, this is probably something you can capitalize on very, very quickly.
Thank you. I can't believe that we're already just about 10 minutes until the end, and there's still so many topics that I want to dive into. But just for the audience who might be listening in, if you do have any questions you want to ask, please do send those through, and I'll be able to ask Eric those questions. But Eric, I want to go back to a topic we touched on before, which is augmenting the workforce, and the fear, not always justified fear, that people can have around intelligent automation. Yeah. How do you work with businesses to kind of create that cultural change?
By getting the people involved in the change is probably the first step. Because remember, most of these organizations are doing this. The vast majority are doing this because they don't have enough people, right? Or they're being utilized in the wrong ways. So so this is the beauty of, I think, zero-based design techniques with automation, is you pull in the people who are actually executing the processes and get them to help you redesign them. And you're out and a way to do it is first off, look, you're going to be working with these digital workers, and so not only are we encouraging them to rethink the way they work, so they're focusing on the things that are more, that require human skill, and which also correlates with things that people enjoy doing, but also to make them realize you can interact with these digital workers. If let's say you're working in a bank and you're on the mortgage desk. The digital worker is going to do all the tick box mortgages, the obvious ones, the ones that don't require any thought, the ones that you're just kind of going through over and over and over. Yeah, their income's fine, everything else is fine, tick. But what we'll need you to do is to pick up the ones that require a bit of thought, a bit of judgment, and so, which is much more interesting, I think, for most people. The other thing we're doing is we're encouraging and building the technology so the average office worker can build the automations themselves.
Okay.
And so this is the whole no-code movement coming into automation and creating something even more extraordinary. So the idea here is that, let's say I'm a manager on that mortgage desk, or just somebody who approves mortgages. What I'll be doing is I'll be writing that interface to myself that the digital worker uses to get me to approve the mortgage. In other words, I can go in, if I can handle a spreadsheet, I can handle no code. I'm going to write the application interface that I need so that digital worker can make my life easier and let me to focus on more interesting things. So it's about engagement. The worst way to go about doing this is say, step aside, the expert's going to come in, we're going to redesign everything, and then you're going to come back in and we're going to change your job. I mean, that's just the worst way to do it. The best way to do it is bring them in. So look, we're going to redesign this from automation first. We're going to enable you to focus on the things that you think are most interesting, that your human capabilities are most important for, and we're going to use the digital workers to take out all the manual work. And generally speaking, when you come at it that way, and you're also, where it's clear that someone's job could be under threat, you're saying, no, we've got other areas for you to be working on. For example, if you're in compliance, don't worry, there's a ton of customer-facing work that's not getting done now because we're spending money on compliance. We're going to move you onto that side, which is much more positive, because now you're helping people open an account as opposed to telling them why you can't open it yet because there's some paperwork to get through. So, but that engagement piece is really important. And bring your HR in right away. Get them to be partners on this. Get them to be talking to people. Make sure you're very clear and open about what the automation program is trying to achieve, what its strategic alignment is, And very quickly, people become attuned to it. I mean, Zurich, for example, I think retrained 3,000 people as part of their automation program.
Wow.
Didn't let anyone go. And their secret sauce, they'll tell you, is they brought their HR people in from the very beginning. And instead of having, because what will happen if you don't do that is you will get resistance, and the project is under serious threat of failure. And not to mention the the morale drop you can possibly get. So this is doable. We're not just making this stuff up. This is what organizations that are very smart about automation are doing, and it's becoming the standard practice. But this is the big change. I mean, I think previously, when automation was being done, on a handful of processes, this wasn't that big of an issue. When you're doing a wholesale, you're taking entire business units and redesigning them, then you really do got to think like this. And it's no different than when, if you merge with another, a company and you have to sort of redesign how people work together and stuff. It's a very similar process, actually, except in this one, we're really looking at a reallocation of work across the human work base and the digital worker work base, and then integrating the two together. And probably that's the most important point to make people realize, is that it's not like there's a group doing automation that are robots and there's a group of humans doing human work. They're actually the same workforce. They're fully integrated. And when done well, and done very well, I should know as a human worker whether that email came from someone with silicon chemistry or carbon chemistry. I should just see someone say, I've got a mortgage over here, I'm not so sure about it, here's why, can you have a look? And if you're happy with it, tick the box. I shouldn't care or know if that's a human being or not. And then I say, I'm done, I send it back, and off I go. And if you can design it that well, you're there. But the point, I make that point because it is about human digital worker integration and collaboration and cooperation. It is one workforce. And maybe that's what people don't realize, that when they talk about automation, you're not dividing your workforce into machines and humans. You're augmenting and enhancing the workforce, and it is all just one.
And I think that definitely links back to the original point that you were making, which is intelligent automation is a strategic move. It's not necessarily a technical move. Yeah. So my next question, it might be a little bit loaded, so I do apologize in advance. But obviously, intelligent automation is bringing around a lot of changes in the workforce, and we're in a time where we need to be reskilling and retraining. Long term, what do you think businesses need to be doing to make sure that the UK, as a whole, the UK has the digital workforce that it's going to need in the next 5-10 years?
Sure, I think it's being aware of what automation technology can do first, and then how that ties into what they're trying to achieve as an organization. And they're looking at, okay, what does that change to skill sets mean? So, for example, if I was running a graduate program for a large organization that's thinking about this, the first thing I would be doing is saying to graduates and to the graduate intake that you probably want to be doing some programming related training. I don't expect you to become developers, but I want you to be aware of some basic principles behind software development. Nothing heavy, nothing that requires a technical degree or anything. But what we're seeing is that you can take even school leavers and train them to be able to program digital workers. So part of it is that you need to be thinking about, how do you work in a world where some of your colleagues will be digital workers that sometimes can you're going to be directing and you're going to be programming, and that it's done in a way that's not deeply technical. It's all kind of point and click kind of stuff. But you need to think about that, and you need to think about, when you're doing work, what work is right for, say, a digital worker, what's work that you should be focusing on. And you should feel that you're empowered to be able to make a decision that, what, this part of my work should be handed to a digital worker. There's no point in me doing this, so that I can focus on the things that I really need to be worrying about. So it's thinking about, empowering individuals to leverage automation. And I think that's the other big revolution here, is that you've kind of got central automation sort of units, but they're working with individuals who are saying, hey, this part of my job should be automated. The role of the two is the individual spotting the opportunity. The central unit is saying, what, not only does this opportunity apply to you, but there's 20 other instances around, and we can do it in one standardized way. So that there's a much more of a collaborative engagement between, I think, technology and the workforce than there ever was before, in terms of creating new technology for the organization. But yeah, they need to think about, okay, what skills do I need in 5 years' time that I don't have now? What skills do I have now that I'm not going to need in 5 years' time? And what's the path? Because look, the skills that I no longer need, they're possessed by people who've got a lot of institutional knowledge. They've got a load of other skills that I need. So they need to start thinking about, okay, what does that arc look like as I transfer those people into new roles? What's the map between their current skill set and what the new roles will look like, and what skills can be transferred, what skills are going to require some additional training, and start planning that out. And I think that's the big change. And we're seeing this. This is Zurich is a great example. They did it with 3,000 people. You know what I mean? So and that's becoming part of that process. And I think it's so important, to remember that large scale automation is a process and a people endeavor. And that people piece, to answer your question directly, is something you must directly plan out. You must directly think about. Changes who you're gonna, your skills intake. I think also, if you're a large enough organization with the influence, you should be talking to universities, saying this is what we need from people. You should be talking to government. You should be talking to the education system, saying these are the skills we need more of going forward. And so that, education systems, government policy stuff can be aligned to you as well. And I think that's something this country could always do better. Is it definitely could be that engagement between industry and government in terms of the education system preparing people for work, could always be improved. And I think this is a great opportunity to be able to do that.
That's a whole other topic we could get into between industry and education, but unfortunately, I don't think we have that time left to do that. But definitely from what I'm hearing is that intelligent automation is key. Intelligent automation is here, but it's only going to be sustainable if we empower the workforce and don't leave them behind.
Yes.
So final question to you is, what message would you like to leave the audience with here today around intelligent automation?
I think that is strategic now. I mean, this is something that you need to be considering as part of your digitization toolbox. So automation and intelligent automation is a growing tool within that digitization box. And when you're thinking about digitizing, and digitization isn't a project, it's actually just a continuous process. You're constantly digitizing more and more and more. And automation is now part of that. And I think that's probably the healthiest way to think about it is automation is a tool for increasing the digitization of the organization. And, but the one thing is think strategic. How do I improve the business? And how do I make, things just run better in general and to achieve what the business to achieve? And what's the role in automation to enable that?
Thank you so much for joining us here today, Eric, and for sharing so many useful use cases on adoption and deployment of intelligent automation technologies.
Thank you, and my pleasure.
Thank you to the audience as well for sticking around and listening to that session there. Please do join us back at midday, where I'll be delighted to invite my colleague, Sue Daly, to come along and chair our session around cloud computing and what this means for industries of tomorrow. So join us back here at midday, and thank you everyone for